Welcome back to a chilly day here at Black Bear Forge. It's afternoon and I finally got it up to about 20 degrees here in the shop. Been preheating the anvil with some big pieces of steel. So I thought we would see if we could forge something today. I think we're going to make a hook with a flower motif on the top, kind of a sunflower looking thing. I'm not going to style it after a specific flower, just kind of that general vein. So I'm going to start off with a piece of 1/4 by 1.5 inch material. It's about 7 inches long. I'll probably cut this off. This is just a piece of scrap that I had out there. So that's about 6 millimeters by about 38 millimeters and somewhere in the neighborhood of 180 millimeters long. This is another one of those projects. Exact sizes don't matter. We're just looking at the techniques that I might use to make a flower. I really like having the gas forge in these cold days. It puts a lot more heat into the shop than the coal forge does. Plus it'll heat these nice big pieces of plate so I can preheat my anvil, which is actually kind of warm to the touch now. It's not cold, it's not hot, perfect temperature. So while I leave this last piece on there to heat, let's go ahead and put our material in to get ready to work. I'm going to start with the guillotine tool so we can butcher in. I want to start by isolating about a square of this, so about 1.5 inches through the guillotine tool, which is about as big a piece I can get in here. I'll take this down to about 3/4 inch in here. And this section will become the flower, this section will become the hook, and as I say, most of this will get cut off later. This may take just a couple of heats to get where we want it to be. I'll have to reduce this some. Now, quite often I would go from this point under the power hammer, but because it's so cold today, the oil in the power hammer is thick, and I don't want to take a chance on causing a problem with it. So I could put a heater next to it for an hour or so, but we'll have this done in that amount of time. Now eventually I want to round this up, so I'm going to go ahead and start by knocking the corners off. And you could trim it round, but if you forge it round, you leave more material so you can get a bigger flower in the long run. That means I'm less likely to hit it as I come in and refine the shoulder that'll be the hook. Even though the anvil isn't that cold, it's still cold in the shop, so things still cool down pretty quickly. Depending on what it is you want in your finished hook, you can cut this off wherever you want to, but I don't think I need a great big hook. The flower is the important part of this project. And this way we don't have to draw out quite as much material to make the hook out of. So I've cut about 3 inches off of that. Now I'll go over the horn and draw this out. Make sure you keep flattening it because the edges spread more than the middle upsets. The horn gets this done fairly quickly. This has gotten considerably thicker as we've done done that, we're essentially upsetting when we're working from this side. So we need to spread that, we need to draw it out and make it thinner. The tip isn't bad. I kind of like what this looks like here. We need to keep thinning this until it's back to about 1/4 of an inch. We'll turn it around and just concentrate on the end up here. We'll finish the hook portion after we do the flower. I just want to do most of the drawing out so that if I accidentally hit the flower, or I'm less likely to accidentally hit the flower, I should say. That's looking pretty good and even. Gives me something nice to hold on to while we work on the flower. The next thing I want to do is round this up and then enlarge it, spread it out, and make the flower a little bit bigger. You work it over the far edge of the anvil this way, or you can squat down and work it over the near edge this way. But in any case, you just want to get that as close to round and evenly thick as you can. We're going to want to get it hot and spread it. If we peen it, it's going to go one direction. We can peen it that direction, then peen it this direction and spread it. Or we can use something like a rounding hammer, and it should spread fairly evenly. So we'll just start pretty much in the center. And keep an eye on it, see where it needs to spread. It is spreading a little bit more widthwise than it is lengthwise. So I think we'll take a cross peen and spread it that way. It's pretty close to round. Then I just want to smooth that out. I'm going to go ahead and let this cool. And I can take a silver pencil and I can draw what I want to chisel for the flower. Okay, I've let this cool down some, and I'm just going to divide it into some number of sections here. If you need to, you can file some of the corners and make it a little rounder, and I might still do that. You have to decide if you're going to divide it equally or unequally. I'm not sure which looks better. I suppose I could go examine some regular sunflowers and decide, but for now I think this will work. And each of these will be the tip of a petal. So I want to cut this out here to give it some petal shape. Then we may do some more drawing out after we do this. Now, I won't actually cut this out over here. I will chisel that in. Otherwise, we just cut the flower off the end of the hook and it doesn't do us any good. Now, another option for something like this, it's a little bit more complicated, but you could then come back and leave secondary petals that look like they're behind, and you can butcher these lines and do whatever you want. But I think for the first one of these, let's not get too carried away, and let's keep it simple. So now we want to cut these. I'm going to go ahead and start this cold, then we'll probably finish it hot. I'm just going to let the curve of the chisel define the little lobes here. Start with your first blow kind of light so you can adjust if you need to. This will give us a mark we can come back and find hot using the very same chisel. This is something you could do under the treadle hammer quite readily. I'm just going to do it at the anvil just so you can see that you don't have to have a treadle hammer. Well, that doesn't happen very often. It's a tool I made ages ago. There's one reason you wear safety glasses, just in case something like that breaks with some shards. But you can see that this has fairly wide grain, which means it was probably too hot when it was quenched. That's what led to the breakage. That's kind of sad. Guess what? One of these days we're going to make a new curved chisel. It's also a reason why I like taking heat treating a little bit more seriously as I get more experience, because that helps to avoid some of these things. Not the end of the world. We're all going to have tools that break. So I have some other options. I've got these other curved chisels that may be the right radius. That was a little tight. That one might work. But you can also do this with a straight chisel. If it's a small chisel and it's curved this way, it's still straight in this dimension, but because it has a fairly small line, you can kind of scribe an arc with it. Not quite as nice as a perfectly fitting curved chisel, but it is more versatile. It's also a much smaller chisel, so I may not do any of this hot at this point. This may all be done cold, but we'll see. Let's try this chisel and see what it does. Nah, I think it's going to be too tight of a radius. So it looks like the straight chisel is going to be the way to do this. One of the advantages of chisel cutting this is that it's going to create a bevel as we cut it. Whereas if we used a plasma cutter, a bandsaw, a grinder, something like that, it would end up with flat sides, and that would look okay, but it won't look as good as the chisel cut is. It's entirely up to how you want to do it. The curved chisel makes life fairly easy, so we will make another curved chisel in one of these videos. Luckily, tools don't break very often, but you're more likely to have failures with tools that you make early in your blacksmithing career before you really get the hang of controlling the heat during the heat treat. This one just broke in 2 pieces, and my experience is that's usually what happens. It's usually the struck end, if you don't dress them properly, that breaks off in little chips. But usually if you break the working end, it usually just breaks in half or in 2 pieces or something like that. Not really that dangerous, not that big a deal. But just in case it's throwing chips, make sure you got safety glasses on. This is what they're there to protect you from. I know a lot of blacksmiths that do have little chips in their hands because of tools that have knocked a chip off of. It's usually from poor maintenance of the struck end versus poor heat treating of the working end. Just something to think about. I think we'll probably do some cleanup of this with a file at this point, because we are going to end up with some chop marks and a little bit more ragged cut from the straight chisel. And this one's just going to be a chisel line. And we'll come back and we'll butcher this one in, because I do have a butcher, and that'll give it some depth. Just goes to show you, sometimes things don't quite go as planned. Okay, I think I'm going to take that to the vise and see if I can break these off of there. So this may take just a little while. I would have preferred to have done it hot. I just don't have a chisel this size that's long enough or handle to do hot. This is one I usually use for much more delicate work under the treadle hammer. But with a bit of perseverance, we will get the job done. Ooh, that's squealy. We'll tighten that up a little bit more. Now, I don't want to file this straight across. I want to file it and leave that little bit of a bevel the chisel created. It's one of the reasons for chisel cutting it in the first place. I just want to take any sharp edges off, any raggedness, and then make sure that's a nice clean bevel. So I've been all the way around that to clean up the profile. Now I'm just going to clean up the bevel a little bit in the filing vise. I'm going to take a butcher and I'm going to set these lines in a little bit deeper. The butcher just makes it look like this is sitting up on top of the the strap for the hook as opposed to sitting level with it. It just creates an illusion is all. And there are first pass butchers, which are fairly steep, and second pass butchers, which are flatter and help refine that illusion a little bit. And this may be more than you need to worry about. If you don't have these tools, I wouldn't worry about it too much. But since I have them, I'm going to go ahead and use them. Don't go too deep. You don't want to create a weak spot there. You just want to create that illusion. Kind of like if you've ever done any leather work. The next thing I want to do is I want to put lines between the petals. My original layout lines are the points, so I want to go between these. Again, I'm just going to set this kind of cold and come back hot. This chisel is sufficient to come back with hot. Sometimes the hold fast doesn't. I just want to take these all to the center. Or close to center. I've actually got something else in mind for the center that we'll show you when we do have it hot. So let's get this hot then and fix these lines and deal with the center. So before I finish those chisel lines, I'm going to take a big rivet set right in the middle and create a center portion for the flower. I don't need to chisel deep lines inside of this. And this may take a few heats. Even preheating the anvil, things cool off fast. I think I mentioned that once before. Stop me if you heard this. You can already see this is starting to look much more flower-like. I think we got plenty of heat to finish this. Now I would like to add some texture to this. Even though it's obviously supposed to be a flower, I think it's a little bit on the boring side right now. I think to add some texture to these petals, I'm going to use a little cross peen hammer. It's a good place just to experiment. These things don't take all that long to do, and you can try different things at different times. Make a whole bunch of these. And just see what looks good. This also thins these out and draws them out a little bit. Be careful on this one that overlaps the hook, not to texture the hook part, and that will help with the illusion that it is a separate piece. I don't know if that helps or not, but it does add texture and makes it different. And I'm going to just spread these out a little bit more from the back. That'll help blend that texture a little bit. And this is a little bit funky. If you're really worried about symmetry, you can come back and clean it up with a file. But personally, For something like this, I kind of like it funky. A little bit free form. And I'm going to use a center punch in this center section to give the impression of a seed head, just random center punches. But I would also like that to be more three-dimensional. So to do that, I'm going to take our bottom rivet set that we made in a few videos back, and a ball tool that's much smaller than the one we used for the rivet set, and see if I can drive that down in there. This would be a good place for a striker, so I don't have to drop this quite so often. But you can see that's already quite three-dimensional. I like that pretty well. Now I'm going to go back to our chisel and flatten the back of the flower out without getting into that seed head. That's starting to look a lot better in my opinion. I think we're going to go ahead and finish the hook now, and then we'll do the last few details on the flower. I think I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes for the screws here as opposed to punching them, just because I want smaller holes. Punched holes would be bigger, I think. I just don't have a little tiny punch. Now for this hook, instead of my typical point with a little curly cue, I think I want to spread this out a little bit. Just something a little bit different, kind of a fishtail effect, but not quite a regular fishtail, not quite that wide. Just something like that. And I'm making this up as we go along. Put a bevel on what will be the front of the hook. Now I want to dish this a little bit so it has a very gentle top surface on it. So I'm going to do that dishing from the back side. At the same time, I'm going to roll the end of the hook over a little bit. And hopefully end up with a nice little end here that's something a little bit unique compared to what I usually do. This kind of detail is just up to what you feel like doing. This is just what I felt like doing, just to see what it would look like. You notice that I'm dishing it so the front side of the flower is where the convex surface is, but I'm rolling it to the back side of the hook. That's important to think about. I'm just going to use a bending fork to shape the hook part. I want a fairly broad hook. This is so long, there's no reason to make a little teeny tiny hook on the end out of it. can make a few adjustments at the horn of the anvil. That's pretty much it for the hook part. Now I want to do the last little details to the flower. And maybe you don't want to do anything to your flower. Maybe you're happy with it. So I'm going to start this in the wood block. This has various depressions, so I can work on different things here. I just want to give it just a little bit of a dome. Not too much. It doesn't need to be a great big ball-shaped thing, but I'm also then going to bring these petals out a little bit. And even though it's a little cold, I think I can do that. And that's pretty much all we need to do at the block. I think I may roll these petals a little bit more at the anvil. The problem with rolling these out like this is that they will be something that might snag something. So think about it, depending on your use for the hook. If it's just going to a random customer, you might not want to do this. But I think it makes the flower look much better. I think this is one I'm going to brass brush as it cools. Give it a good wire brushing with the regular brush. Make sure it's scale free. And then, well, it's still too hot to touch, but well below a glowing heat. Give it a nice vigorous brass brushing. And it starts to turn kind of a gold color. Hopefully you can see that in the camera. Then as it cools a little bit more, we'll wax it. Now our hook is complete. It's got a very interesting, kind of funky little flower on the top. It's not super uniform, and I don't know that it needs to be. It's just up to what you see in your mind. If you want something perfectly uniform, make a paper pattern, glue that to the blank after you get it forged out, and cut it out according to the paper pattern. It'll be much more regular. I don't know that it needs it. I kind of like this done by hand and by eye appearance myself. Just depends on what you're going to use it for. But doing unusual hooks like this can be a lot of fun. Hooks are simple. You got very little invested in material. As long as you don't break too many tools, it's a relatively simple and straightforward thing to do. It's starting to get cold again. The sun is about ready to set, so I'm going to call it a day and head inside. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Feel free to take some time, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends, or on your social media sites, but then make time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe. Try not to break too many tools, and make sure you wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one. If you would like to provide financial support for the videos here at Black Bear Forge, you may do so by following the links down in the video description. These are merely donations. The content is free and will remain free.